Hello, hello, hello. Welcome. And so right now we're going to talk about facilitating a project workshop. What are the things you need to do before the workshop, during the workshop, and after the workshop? For context, we're talking about maybe you want to have a RICS workshop, or you need to have a lessons learned workshop, or there's a planning workshop when you're trying to understand what the deliverables are and what you're trying to achieve. And there are many moving pieces. How do you get everyone in the room to run through that and so that you can get the right results, right? So here are the few things you need to get done. Pre-meeting, planning ahead and having the right conversations early is always critical to the success of your workshop. Here are some things you need to get done first. First, you need to be very clear on the meeting purpose and outcome. Very clear to yourself. What are you trying to achieve? What is the outcome you want this workshop or this meeting to be? So for instance, if it's a risk workshop, the outcome is that you have clarity on the risks that might affect your project. If you had a follow-up, it might be you want clarity on the mitigating actions that have been outlined for your project. If it's lessons learned, the same thinking. You want all the lessons, the critical lessons around the project have been outlined. You have to have a purpose. What are you trying to achieve? If it's you're trying to work through a plan and you're not sure of all the deliverables and all the pieces of the plan that need to come together, then the outcome is you want to be clear on the steps to get to where you're going to and everything that needs to be done, right? In project management, there are always workshops. There's always a meeting to run through a design, run through a plan, go through a risk register, and the like. So it's really important that if you're in the project management profession, you understand how to run these workshops, how to facilitate them to get the best results. So once you are clear on the purpose and the outcome of the meeting, you outline the agenda. You get clear on the agenda that everyone will get, right? You outline the agenda. How is it going to work? And you start that. You might not be able to finish at this stage, but at least outline what are the things that you want to get out of the meeting. And you'll see why in a minute, right? Now, once you have your agenda done, you determine the stakeholders that need to be present to make this meeting a success. You know what the outcome is. You know the key things that need to be discussed. And since you know that these are the things that need to be discussed, maybe you're thinking about risk in the area of the website, or you're thinking about risks in the area of finance, or you're thinking about risk in the area of development, or in the commercial area. You have identified that these are the kind of risks that you want us to talk about. Or it might be that you've identified that in the agenda you want to talk about lessons learned during the planning phase, or you want to talk about lessons learned during the implementation phase, or lessons learned during some other planning meeting or some other workshop itself. You understand what you are trying to achieve, right? So that will determine the stakeholders that you invite along to the meeting, the people you want to be at your meeting. So number 3 is determine the stakeholders that need to be in your meeting. Then the next thing you need to do is determine the venue or the platform. If it is a physical meeting, usually in your office, determine what room will be big enough to take the stakeholders that you're inviting. What room will have the facilities you need, whether you need a nice plain wall, or you need equipment like screens, a video conferencing. You might need all those things. So you think about that when you're determining the room that you go to. Then once you've done all of that, then you send an invite as far as possible in advance as you can. It's really important that you do that. And when on the day of the meeting, then you set up your venue and allow yourself enough time to set up the venue before you get started. So you have everything set. Everyone knows why they're coming to the meeting. Everybody understands the agenda. Everybody understands the outcome of the meeting. You've done all the pre-work. You have you've done all the pre-work. You've determined the venue, you've made the venue suitable. Everyone knew about the meeting earlier on. There's something that is not here, or you should also do is in a later slide, to make sure you have some snacks and some things ready to be able to keep the momentum of your workshop. I will also advise that for workshops, try not to make your workshops too long if you can at all. Standard and suitable, where you have everyone's attention, 2 hours is usually enough. Two hours is usually enough for a workshop. Granted, there are workshops that are longer, and if you find yourself needing to do a very long workshop, make sure you allow for comfort breaks and tea breaks and things like that, just to help people stay concentrated and stay engaged in the workshop. Okay, so everything is now set. You, as the project manager, is in charge of chairing the meeting. Now, sometimes, especially when it's lessons learned and there are many other stakeholders there, you might want to get a neutral individual to come and chair that meeting. It might be somebody from the PMO office that chairs and facilitates that meeting, and that's fine. So if you're on this call and you're going into the PMO line, that's something you need to keep in mind, that you might be the one chairing the meeting. And if you know that you're the one chairing the meeting, it's important that you remember that your focus is to make people as relaxed as possible, as focused as possible on the agenda. And the reason why is when people start discussing, when the conversation starts flowing, sometimes we veer off onto a different path. We lose focus on what we're trying to achieve. So you as a facilitator, your job is to always make sure you bring the people back into what we're trying to do, right? So make sure you have that in mind. So at the meeting, first thing you do is you do introductions. Hello. You do introductions. Who is who? You make sure everyone is clear on who is who, right? If it's a workshop that nobody knows themselves, that's the first thing you do. If it is something that others know themselves already, then introduce icebreakers. Oh, say something about yourself. You can say, name one thing nobody in the office knows about you. There's so many icebreaker things that you can do. Or put in an icebreaker, set the scene, make people feel comfortable. Make sure that there's tea, there's coffee. If it's a virtual setting, then icebreakers are even becoming more important. There can be a small game just to get people's attention going, right? So once you've done the introduction, then you outline the purpose of the meeting and what is the expected outcome. They should already know this because you should have put it in the invite. But again, you mention it again just to be sure that everybody knows this is the purpose of the meeting and this is what we're expecting to get out of the meeting. I'm expecting that we will have at least 15 risks identified, or I'm expecting that we would have identified the key risks that people are worried about, or I'm expecting that we would have identified the major lessons that we needed to learn. I'm expecting that in each area we would have identified the key deliverables. You catch my drift? Let people be clear on what the expected outcome of the workshop needs to be. Now, you need to then talk about what is the approach. How are we going to do this? Are we going to all have flip charts across the room where people can go and write in? Or you might have decided that because you are very clear on the areas, let's use a lessons learned workshop, for instance. Let's say you're clear that you want to have lessons learned on the whole project, maybe the initiation phase, the planning phase, all the phases of the project. You want to have lessons learned. Now, ideally, you wouldn't be doing your lessons learned like this. In real life, you might have, if it was a small project, yes, you probably would do everything at once. But if it's a larger project, then you do your lessons learned in the phases of your project. So you can have a lessons learned workshop just for the planning phase of the project, or for the design phase of the project, right? Or the delivery phase of the project. So just bear in mind that you can't have lessons learned across, just like you have risk workshop, you might have to update the risk and you have to review your risk and do your risk workshops across the length of the project. So it might be different. But let's assume that you're doing a lessons learned for the whole project. You can put on the wall in the room that you're using, right? So a flip chart or a sticky paper on the wall, this side is for planning, This side is for the implementation. This side was the delivery. This side was when we were closing out. What lessons did you learn? You have put white paper there, and then you've given everybody sticky notes of different colors, right? So what you would then do is you would say, okay, guys, this is the approach. I've put paper all over the wall. I've put and I've sectioned it into the areas that I want us to concentrate on, right? So can you please all have a quick think? So you give them a chance without making any assumptions to write down the lessons that they think that they have learned in those categories. Sometimes you just put the paper all across and you don't even choose the categories just yet. You allow people to write down the lessons or write down the key risks that they think of, and then you choose the category. But more often than not, you help trigger the communication, you help the thinking by setting out the categories from the beginning. Then you give people a chance. Of course, you have put paper there, the sticky notes are there, there's pens there, there's chocolates, if chocolate or sweets available, and you allow people to sit down and write, think about what are the lessons we've learned, what are the key risks, what are the deliverables we need to think about. You will quickly see that as the workshop is going along, there will be a general theme of activities. There'll be then a general theme of lessons. You let everyone write their notes, and then you tell them to go and put it in the right section of the wall that is most relevant to what they have written down. Everyone puts it, and then you go around the room and you group things that are in the same category, because you're almost sure some people will write the same thing in a different way, but they're talking about the same risk or the same lesson, right? Or the same deliverable. Then you start grouping them into groups that make sense, right? So that's what you do in the meeting, and you keep on talking about it. You keep on asking, okay, so now that we've grouped it, so first of all, you've allowed them to have some time to think about what they want to write down. You've given them sticky notes. They've written down all their notes. Then they've all stood up by themselves to go and put the sticky notes in the right section, right? Then you can then go around and say, and look at the sections with everybody's sticky note, and you jointly agree with all the stakeholders in the room what goes into what group. You ask, what were you thinking about when you wrote this, to make sure that we are categorizing it properly, right? And that helps you to categorize all the risks or all the lessons learned. If you do it well, by the end of the lesson, you would already have clear things, clear lessons, clear clear risks that you, at least the high level risks, you are clear on what they are. And in that meeting, people that agree or disagree will also say so, or people will remember something else and they will say so. So that's how you would do your work, facilitate the workshop to make sure that everyone gets involved. Now, if you're facilitating and somebody doesn't speak or doesn't write anything down, ask their opinion or say, do you agree with what's here? Let help them to get involved, but do not embarrass anyone in the meeting, right? Because sometimes the ones that are quiet actually are pondering and they might come up with something important as the meeting goes along. But you make as much effort to involve everyone in the meeting as much as you can. So that's literally how you would facilitate the meeting. Now, what happens after the meeting? Is that all? You just end up with sticky notes everywhere on the wall? What do you need to do next? Before I go into that, now, I've described what you would do if it is in a physical venue. If it's not, it can be, you might find yourself working virtually, right? So you can't have sticky notes everywhere. There are different programs that allow you to use sticky notes virtually now, and I'll mention a few of them in the notes later on. But if you don't have that program, you can even use something as simple as Excel. If you load an Excel document into your company's Teams site, if you're in that group, if you've created a Teams group for everyone to work in, people can make changes, people can comment, and you just create a spreadsheet, put columns, put the same type of spaces that you created before, and allow people to type into the right spaces. and they just do it virtually, right? And I'll give you a sample of one of those spaces as well. You just give them space and then people type virtually in it. If they're all Teams, Microsoft Teams does this very well. And there will be some other software that does it. But I've explained it in Excel and we're using Teams because Teams is very popular, okay? And so you do it that way, all right? So you don't have to buy new software. Excel and your company's Teams will do it just fine. And you can work on the same document at the same time and you get the same result, yeah? Another thing you can do before your meeting starts, if somebody is not going to be available to come for the meeting, you want to give them a chance to make their own input, right? So when you're sending out the invite, you also send out an accompanying email saying, this is the meeting that's going on. If there's any document that people need to read up on before the meeting, you send it to them. If there is, you also give them a chance to comment on the risk if they want to give their own inputs ahead of the meeting. You send them the Excel sheet or you send them a Word document, or you just say, send me an email. If you have comments or you're not sure you'll be able to make it, let me know your feedback so that I can ensure that it is included in this workshop pack, right? So that's something that's very important to do. That will help other people that might not be able to attend that particular workshop to be able to have their input. Okay, so once all of this is done, what do you do at the end? You basically remove your post-it notes, your flip charts from the wall. Be careful. No matter how well you have put all the post-it notes, they have a knack for falling off. So use sticky tape to keep everything in place. If you're doing this remotely, make sure you save that Excel sheet that people have been working on, or save that document, whatever document it is, make sure it's saved. And if possible, you might as well record the session right from the beginning. Now, when you're recording a session, make sure you ask for permission before you start. At the very beginning of the meeting, this comes down to the approach section here in the number 3 points here. When you're describing how the meeting will go, you can also say, I'm going to record the meeting so that we can have a reference point and it will be helpful to me when I'm writing up the notes. Ask, if it's a work meeting, people will probably not mind you recording it, as long as everyone that was there has access to the recording, okay? So record the meeting if at all possible. Now, once you've taken everything out or you've saved it, then you take some time to pull all the outputs into a relevant document. So that might be your plan, your risk register, or your lessons learned, or whatever, depending on the workshop you were having. You pull everything into the relevant document so it's in one place, right? Then you send that document to all the stakeholders to review. Give them a chance to review it, tell them this is what you've written down to make sure it all makes sense to them. Some of them might rephrase how you've written a risk or how you've written a lessons learned to make sure that the meaning, what the output that they were trying to explain is clearly articulated. That's fine, let them do it. And then once it's clearly articulated, you can fine tune it to make it make final sense, right? So you send the document to people to review. Now, you can either send a document for them to review or you arrange a follow-up session if required. And sometimes you need to do the two. You send the document ahead of time. This is what we've done. I'm now arranging a follow-up session just to make sure that we are all happy with the lessons and the categorization. Or now we're going to make sure we're all happy with the lessons and the categorization. And then you add in a new element. You might say in that meeting for lessons learned, you want to prioritize the risk. What are the top risks? In your opinion, what are the top lessons that we need to learn here? In your opinion, based now that we have outlined all the lessons, or now that we've outlined all the risks, what are the top risks, the top 10? What are the top lessons? What is the critical part? What are the key deliverables or the key milestones that need to be achieved? You see, you use that second meeting to fine-tune what has been written, what we've talked about. Some people might add new things while you're in the meeting, but also you want to make sure that the prioritization is also done. It might be that you set up another meeting not to do prioritization for risk if you've done it already. It might be you now want to say, now you've done the risk, we are sure what the risk are, we know what the priorities are. Can we now focus on the mitigating actions for each of the risks? You can do that in a different workshop, or you can have one-to-one conversations. I suggest in a workshop so that you get it done once and for all. Okay, so this, my friends, is exactly how you run a workshop. Thank you.